This is Dune Talk, a DuneNewsNet.com production. Join us now for the latest Dune news, reactions, and lively discussions.
Hey, welcome everybody. Welcome back to our show. It's getting super close here. So a lot of you guys have probably already enjoyed the movie, and we're going to get to really soon. So getting excited. This is Marcus Gabriel, editor at DuneNewsNet.com, here today with Simon.
2 weeks from the time we're recording this.
Johnny Sobchak here, back again as usual. And yeah, it's coming up for real. It felt very strange and dreamlike to be getting my tickets the other day and making reservations and picking which seat and everything. It's very, I'm not going to believe it, of course, until I'm in the theater and the credits are probably rolling. But yeah, very exciting.
So how many tickets do you have so far?
How many tickets do I have right now? I have 4 confirmed. I'm definitely seeing at least 4 times opening weekend. Maybe a 5th will sneak in there. We'll see.
Marcus had told me that tickets were going on sale on Monday, but he told me this on Sunday. So I downloaded the local theater app and I was refreshing the app like starting at 9 o'clock on my phone at work. So I was trying to be like super slight about it. I was like, why aren't they loading? Is my internet down? You know, but then I found out that they would go on sale on Monday. And then, so I'm seeing it Thursday night and then Friday with some coworkers. So especially with my buddy Noah. Hey, Noah, I know you listen and you watch. Dune broke the internet, right? Monday, is that what happened?
So much demand, like all those services, they couldn't handle it.
Right. Facebook claims it's not Dune, but we all know. Come on.
Exactly.
Yeah, so we had tweeted about that, the time when it was expected that tickets would go on sale, and basically the first thing I did, because I had this in plan for a while, that I wanted to do one of the theater rentals, because of course there's a regular showings, like for example on Thursday evening, Friday, throughout the whole day, but AMC Theaters is actually offering like full theater rentals at like I guess less convenient times, because it's usually like during the day or like more early evening. But yeah, like I took one of those, and a couple of those went quite fast. So I think people had a similar time, and then I'm still planning to get something for IMAX on Thursday evening. And I know that at my work that we're planning to do a group outing, so I'm definitely going to see it like at least 3 times within those first couple of days, and hopefully more in the week to come. Like I know for me, because I'm in downtown, there's no IMAX right nearby, so I'm going to have to go a bit further out.
Yeah, 2 times for sure, and who knows how many times HBO Max is running. Maybe my data will be capped.
Yeah, no, it's nice too, because at least we know for sure that it's 2 weeks between when Dune opens and when Eternals comes out. So they have a solid 2 weeks of IMAX. So if for some reason people can't rush out opening night or opening weekend, you do have time, 14 days basically to go out and check it out in that premium format. And of course it'll be in theaters for who knows how long, regular theaters afterward.
Yeah, exciting times. So let's go ahead and go to our movie news topics for today.
Dune movie news.
Our first story today is box office updates. So this past weekend, it was actually Sunday was Denis Villeneuve's 54th birthday, and he got to celebrate with Dune crossing the 100 million mark at the overseas box office. So to be exact, the movie reached 100.9 million after like all was said and counted after the weekend. So yeah, over 100 million, and we still have 19 days to go before, or at that point 19 days to go before the domestic releases, Chinese premieres, Japan and UK, all that. So definitely a major milestone. So just keep in mind, this is playing in 34 countries, and we still have like a whole wave. Like the movie has to premiere in North America, South America, China, Japan, UK. So it's definitely impressive. I want to hear from you first, Johnny. Like, how do you feel about like being at this stage where we are?
Yeah, well, I mean, this is really exciting for obvious reasons. I mean, it's coming in hot. It's coming in, better than we could have expected, I think, at this point. I think no doubt the way it's performing, it's weeks into its run at this point, and it's still doing really well. It's having good holds, even in places where it has, fierce competition, whether it's from Venom or No Time to Die. It's dropping just 45% in its third weekend in places like Italy, holding well in Germany and France as well. And that is also, it's interesting because they said initially, oh yeah, it's finally crossed over 100 million. And then even afterward, they were like, oh wait, like this is actually, it did better. Like the numbers came in even better than it was initially said. And it's done that virtually every single time when it comes to these sort of projections or estimates and forecasts. It ends up being better on the day, on the weekend, on the regardless of what region or market or country it's in. So just across the board, it seems like there's a lot of excitement, a lot of, very strong word of mouth. If there wasn't people liking the film and telling people that they like the film, then it wouldn't have this extended success that we're seeing. And who knows, by the time more markets open, and all those markets open on the week of, the 20th, 21st, 22nd, before any of those open, I mean, it could be, close to or over, around the neighborhood of 150 million, which would be very impressive. Because it will have some markets also opening between now and when the US and China opens. So it's gonna be bringing in more numbers, and I'm excited to see, how those progress, how those new markets open. But yeah, I am really just pleased. I mean, there's really no negative that you can really pull from any of this. I mean, it's just doing very well. And it makes me, of course, optimistic about how it's going to do here once it opens, and in other markets such as, China and the UK and other places. But yeah, 103.9 million total. That's pretty happy, satisfying number, I would say right now. And it's even more satisfying when you think about the fact that Villeneuve himself has said, and he said before it even premiered at Venice, for Warner Brothers and for Legendary, and for them to not want to go forward with a sequel, it would have to do very poorly. It would have to be a disaster. And this is the complete opposite side of the spectrum. So it's looking good. It's looking good.
Yeah, and you mentioned those holds. It's basically like in the second weekend, we were talking about an average of 30%, and on this third weekend it was only minus 45%, and this was despite, as you mentioned, like No Time to Die premiering in a lot of these marketplaces, and then of course you had Venom in Russia. And I think one of the big success stories was of course France, which was the number one grossing so far for Dune with 18.6 million after 3 weeks. So Simon, how do you feel about that? And what are people saying?
Well, first of all, to quote the great Larry David, I think it's doing pretty good. As someone who's French, I am very proud of you, France. This is the second proudest thing I've ever seen you do. Win the World Cup in '98 and 2017 was the other one. Actually, my brother finally saw it, and he sent me a message right away. He's like, I just saw Dune. Wow. And I freaked out. I was like, call me now. And he's curious. He's interested. He's like, so there's a third one, right? They're going to make more. I'm like, hopefully, finger crossed, right? But he kept asking me questions, and he told me, here's what he told me. Chalamet is amazing. Oscar Isaac is a force to be reckoned with. And we'll talk more about Oscar Isaac in a little bit. Hans Zimmer's music is not music per se, and my brother's a sound designer, so he loved it. He's like, it's not something I would go around listening to on a regular basis, but he's like, it works very much like his score for 2049. And also, my brother is the person that introduced me to Philip K. Dick and Blade Runner, and he told me it gives him big Blade Runner 2049 vibes. And I know my brother puts that movie maybe a little bit higher than Johnny does, but I don't think that's possible. But overall, everyone I've talked to a couple other friends that have seen it 4 or 5 times now. So Yeah, I'm curious to know when it's going to hit North America and the UK, if it's going to go back to number one overseas, maybe in some countries, because the hype will be back. And some people were like, well, I missed it the first time around. Oh, it's still playing. Let's go check it out.
It's already the second most watched movie in France of this whole year, and the number one was actually a French speaking movie, so that's impressive. Like number one English speaking film, and there's still room to go from there. Other country, of course, where it did really well was Russia, which also exceeded 18 million in 3 weeks, and that was despite even in its third weekend where Venom had a record breaking opening. What I wanted to ask Johnny, like when you look at like No Time to Die and Venom, what they've done in their first weekend, of course, like they've done amazing openings. Of course, like they've opened in additional countries, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to be asking the question, well, like Dune did well, but like if you compare it to these two films, like it's it's maybe not even in the same ballpark. So how would you respond to that?
I mean, look at, and this is something that had been said the first weekend, it was said the second weekend, they said it again this weekend. In the markets where Dune is overperforming and running ahead of films, the biggest films of the year, including films like Shang-Chi, including films like Godzilla versus Kong, including films like Black Widow. So in those markets, especially the European ones, it's doing extremely well. And so that is promising, I think, on a global scale, because yes, it has done so well, and it still has many more markets to come. You have to consider the fact that this movie is not, the first Venom film made like $800 million worldwide. And Venom is a very popular character. He's a Spider-Man character, and everyone, just like the Joker made $1 billion, is very similar in that regard. This is a direct sequel to that first movie that made $800 million. It's more Venom. It's Carnage, which again is another popular character in the comics, in the cartoons. And then you have, on the other side, you have Bond, which is a direct sequel to the last 4 Bond movies, all starring Daniel Craig, and it's the finale for him in the role, which he's been in for 15 years. So it is like a kind of, for a comparison, like an Endgame style, like event conclusion film, which is interesting. And so you have 2 very popular, 2 very established film franchises. Skyfall made over $1 billion. Spectre, which was not even a very good or well-received movie, made like $800 million. So these movies are, of course, going to do well. And there's no doubt that I don't think anyone would have said that Dune was going to do better than Venom or No Time to Die. But I think that is interesting to consider. And you have to consider these other movies too, that, Dune is being compared to, or is going to have competition with. You're looking at Shang-Chi and Black Widow, which are both MCU movies, the biggest franchise of all time. F9, Fast and Furious 9, a long-running, very established, very well-liked franchise. These movies, Godzilla versus Kong, again, in a franchise, big name characters. So you do have these elements that Dune is lacking, of course, and that is something that you have to consider. But I think that keep those things in mind and still acknowledge that it's still doing better than some of those other films we've been talking about, films that no one expected it to compare to really at all. And so the fact that it's running ahead in those markets is, very promising, I would say, for the rest of the world. And we, of course, you can't take a certain continent or a certain chunk of the region and say, oh, well, this is how it's going to perform everywhere. But if you have the numbers you have now, you can't take the good numbers and make them bad somehow. Like there's no other, you can't argue it. They just are what they are. You would want good numbers more than you would want bad numbers or mediocre numbers. So that's why I think there's a reason for optimism. I think there's reason for optimism about how it's going to perform in, key markets like the UK, Japan, the United States, for that matter, and China. Even though it does have some uphill battles to face, especially in the US and China with regards to its release date timing and, of course, the HBO Max deal in the US. But I think overall, I'm very excited. I'm very enthused by what we've seen so far, what we've heard so far, and I think I've been bullish all along in this movie, so it's not like this is going to be surprising to anyone who's, I remember talking to some guy, I think it was in January of last year, 2020. He was, I was arguing with him about how well Dune could do, and I was like 500 million worldwide. Like I guarantee it makes at least that. And this was before the pandemic was even a thing. And now, as it stands, I mean, it could make close to 400 million worldwide, or more in an ideal scenario. And that's in a pandemic, and that's with the HBO Max deal, which was never even a dream at that point. So there's a lot of conjecture and debate, and some people, I think, no matter what the numbers end up being, they're going to try and say, "Oh, well, it's disappointing. Oh, it doesn't compare to this or that." But you can really twist the numbers any way you want to. At the end of the day, they are what they are. And I think that that's why it gets down to it. I'm like, you can only say what they are. You can't debate about it necessarily. And the people that really care the most are the people that are cutting the checks at Warner Brothers and at Legendary. So I think, we're getting closer to the US release date. The tickets are on sale, as we've discussed. And they're going to know pretty soon, in the next few days, how those pre-sales are looking in all the markets where they are on sale right now, in the UK as well, and other places. And so next week we might get our first forecast or projection, and that's going to be really interesting to see. And that'll, again, be a firm number. And honestly, I think any estimate that they're going to have is going to be A, higher than what people think right now, probably. And B, the actual number when it comes out, I think, is going to be higher than any of the estimates are going to be, because that is what the trend has shown so far, is that people, they might be lowballing it potentially, but I think even then there's still an underestimation. So I'm excited to see what those numbers look like, because so far from everything I've heard and seen, the pre-sales are really good. So, and not just in the US.
Yeah, and like going to the point about No Time to Die, of course, that's an amazing opening overseas. So 121 million in one weekend. But like, think about it, like over 28 million of that came from UK, where Dune hasn't opened yet. And like another 6 million came from Japan. So those are like major markets that we still have to see how well it's going to do.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's interesting too, because, the UK, of course, is like the biggest for Bond, like logically. I think I read something like the opening weekend there that Bond just had is equivalent to like what Endgame had like in the US. Like that's kind of how they see that. So yeah, as I said, established franchises. Also, they have a lot, they are not Denis Villeneuve is a very particular type of filmmaker. Like his sensibilities are not, exactly going to be as all encompassing as something like Venom 2.
Yeah, and speaking of Venom, like that had like 103 million in the first weekend, but that was mostly domestic. So it was basically a 90 million opening. Like Simon, when you think about that opening, like, we were considering, okay, how are things going to work out, like with these blockbusters coming in cinemas? How do you feel like seeing that a movie can do that well now in the States?
Well, it's like you guys were talking. Those are also I don't want to use the word legendary franchises, but they're franchises behind them. So seeing those numbers overseas, they already have their fan base. And minus, the Dune fans, like people listening to this show and people that read the book, Dune is still very much word of mouth. So it's super interesting to see that a film without a well-known fan base is doing well. I'm happy, I think people forget also Venom is loosely kind of connected to the MCU, so people put that together. If you take away the whole Sony, Disney, Marvel thing, and most people don't know about that, but they think Venom, MCU, Spider-Man. Bond is, like you said, it's film 25, I think, of a series.
Yeah.
It's Daniel Craig's last Bond, and everyone loves Craig. So, it's funny because when you guys were talking, I was like, hey, maybe I should go see that in the theater. But I think the numbers are good. I think people are going to get more excited as we get closer. And something I was thinking about, it is also a civilian. I live in a part of Washington that's very military, so it is also a civilian pay week. So maybe people were waiting for paychecks just in general and not, military people buying tickets. So maybe they're doing the math. Okay, we can buy these tickets because we're going to, be okay on bills. So I think after this week, we should see a pretty solid number. I was looking where tickets were selling, and I used to live in LA, so I looked at a bunch of LA theaters and seen like, can I get tickets for like a Thursday or Friday night showing? And most of them are already sold out, so it's interesting.
It is really, like, Simon, to your point, it is very impressive. I will say, like, from what I have seen and heard, and people have been talking about and telling me, like, you would not expect like a movie. I know this is a big movie. Like, there's no denying, like, they're putting a big marketing push behind it. It has big name actors. It has a big name director. But like the numbers and like the tickets and like the amount of interest, I feel, is just so above like what anyone tried to say it would be. I feel, I think that the numbers are going to be so good. Like, it's going to be, people are going to be so surprised, I think. Because also consider the fact that people talk about the HBO Max deal all the time. And there's been a lot of talk about that in the last week, especially because of how well it's doing internationally. And of course, tickets going on sale in the US now. And I just think, there's been like, oh my God, I can't believe they're doing this. They should change it. They should change it. They're going to just ruin the box office. And I think I could go on a huge tangent about this, but ultimately Warner Brothers, they know what they did. Like, they chose to do it knowing what the effects would be. They do not care very much at all about this. They have kind of like, resigned their fate. And so you just have to take what you can get. And I think Godzilla versus Kong in the US, Warner Brothers has had a horrible year. Let's face it. Okay. In every way that you really can. And Godzilla versus Kong, it came out in March, around April, around Easter. So the theaters weren't as widely open as they are now, of course, but it's still got a full wide release, still got IMAX and all that. Its opening weekend, 4-day weekend, mind you, with the Easter weekend, was $34 million in the US. I think Dune is going to, and it cost more to make than Dune as well, by a decent margin. I think this movie is going to make at least $15 to $20 million more than that opening weekend. I think, like, legitimately. And that, I think, is so impressive. And when those comparisons come out, I think also looking at HBO Max numbers, that's going to be an interesting metric to look at as well. So when you combine those two, I just think it's going to be a bigger phenomenon than I think has been given credit so far. And that'll be more apparent as the days and weeks go on, as it finally comes out in all these markets, and the residuals after that, even after Eternals comes out and other things, and as we get more into deeper into the movie season and the award season as well, when that starts up around December and January.
But what's interesting is you ask the average person, you mention Venom, they'll tell you Spider-Man. James Bond, they'll tell you Roger Moore, whatever, Daniel Craig. But Dune, the average person, if you tell them what does it make you think of, they're like, it's a book, I think. There was a movie. Most people don't know it. I mean, perfect example. My HR lady, the other day, I'm walking by her desk, and she's like, you bought a pop figure. I'm like, yeah, I got the Paul Atreides, variant. Totally freaking out, being super dorky, right? And she's like, oh, I saw a preview for that when I saw Shang-Chi, and now I kind of want to see it. She's like, that kid gets on my nerves. I'm like, okay, leave little Timothy Chalamet alone. But she's like, I was like, Sarah, do you want to go see it now because of the preview? She's like, yeah, the preview got me intrigued. And she's like, yeah, I'm going to go see it. I'm like, well, cool. There you go. That's what we want. That's what we want people to see, the preview. And hopefully, they go see Bond. They'll be like, oh, well, crap, that Dune thing looks pretty cool. Also, and I have a weird feeling that we're going to get a Harry Potter preview with Dune. There's not a Harry Potter Fantastic Beasts. So you might get numbers from that like the Potter fans that are like, what? Fantastic Beasts has a preview with Dune. Well, I'll go check it out just for that. And HBO Max numbers, people will always yell and there'll always be the naysayers being like, well, it just ruined the box office. No, and I'm sure no matter how well it does, there will always be a crowd that'll be like, it wasn't as big as Star Wars,
Oh yeah, there's no doubt. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm waiting for those. And I know a lot of those people.
And I do want to touch on the HBO Max part. I mean, as both of you have sort of mentioned it as well. I mean, the HBO Max numbers, they do count. I know people would love to just look at the box office figure and use that to determine Dune's success, but that's not how it's going to be this year. They're going to look at box office, they're going to look at HBO Max numbers, they're going to potentially look at, in some countries, the digital rentals. They're going to look at licensing fees. I mean, at the end of that, all these things are going to contribute to Dune's success, whether it's in the short or the long term. We did get one interesting topic that's come up on our YouTube channel, and I've seen it come up on Reddit and Twitter several times, about how much the movie has to make to break even. And I think there's a lot of different factors that you need to consider this year, because of the pandemic, because of the different distribution models, because they're going all out on marketing, because let's be real, this is a really strong marketing campaign. You see Dune everywhere, Mark was posting a picture of the big Dune posters on the double-decker buses in London. So it's really out there, so they're not holding back on that. So I'm thinking, in order for Dune to break even, I think we are potentially looking at $500 million, but then going at the earlier point, not all movies will break even this year. It's a challenging time, and at the end of the day, the studios are going to evaluate the movies based on how they're doing in this situation. No movie is going to make $1 billion this year, or at least it's not likely. Maybe No Time to Die or Venom have a shot at that, but yeah, it's even if Dune doesn't break even, as we're mentioning, we've already heard it multiple times, the movie would have to do really bad not to get the continuation, and that's clearly not going to be the case. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is do not fear.
Fear is the mind killer.
Yeah,
I've heard that somewhere. Fear is the mind killer. I don't know. Sounds familiar.
Yeah, Marcus. I mean, you're totally right. That's a great point, because people keep asking this question. They keep saying, "Is it this? Is it that?" And the answer is no. There is no number. There is no number for the box office that anyone can point to and say, "Oh, that's what's going to tell Warner Brothers. Oh, you go ahead, go make the next one." There's too many factors, and there's the pandemic. There is the HBO Max deal, and those are really the two primary things. But you have to consider as well. Say that it did, not great numbers on HBO Max, but it overperforms at the box office. Okay, then what do they say? say that it does really well in HBO Max, but box office numbers, especially domestically, are kind of Well, then obviously they know, HBO Max people, what percentage of people decided to watch it there. And then also think about this, say it's done super well overseas. It's done really well, especially in Europe. Say that it opens everywhere else and it does pretty well, just across the board well. Or say it just underperforms a little bit. You still have universal praise from critics. Everyone that has seen it, as far as audience members, I would say 90%, about the same as critics, have said they liked it. At the minimum, have said they liked it. Some people love it. Some people are going crazy for it. And then you have the other factor that no one's really talking about, which is awards. So that, and don't underestimate how those can factor in, or how those can be persuasive. If Dune does, pretty well, toes the line as far as box office, and then it goes and gets 10 Oscar nominations, including Best Picture and Best Director, you really think they're gonna and it wins 3 or 4 Oscars? You really think they're gonna be like, I guess? I mean, it didn't do like amazing at the box office in the pandemic, and when we have this HBO Max deal, I guess we're just gonna pack it up and call it a franchise. That's not gonna happen. There's so many different things going on. I cannot wait because I've been living it up the last few weeks as these numbers have come in, and every day someone's like, oh, I can't believe how well it's doing. I can't believe that it's doing this. I just can't wait in 2 weeks when these numbers finally come in, and like there's not going to be any more discussion about it. It's going to be, what it is, and I think it is going to be, it's going to surprise a lot of people, I would say.
Picking back off of Johnny's whole entire thing about awards, there's some people that wouldn't care about Dune, if they see, hey, it's nominated for this or that, some people are going to watch it just because of the nominations. And then let's say it does win Best Acting for Chalamet, right? Then you might get some people that are, want to be actors that are going to watch it to see his performance. So all that are revenues, and views. And maybe they'll tell people, hey, I had no idea what this was, but I was blown away by it. So
yeah, no, it's definitely good, guys. Yeah, no, that does draw people in. There's no doubt. And the Academy, as far as Oscars go, they think the same thing. If a movie does really well and is a kind of like pop culture sensation, they want to bring that movie in and put it up and give it nominations and give it awards, because that means more people are going to watch the show. More people are going to be interested and see other movies and go and look at those. Look at what happened with Black Panther. Look at what happened with Joker. Those are just 2 examples off the top of my head that were like pop culture, phenomenons. If this, again, is anywhere close to that, that's going to be just another reason that and another factor, as you pointed out, Simon.
Yeah, and to close on the box office update. So I think Johnny, you and I were basically agreeing that there's so many different factors coming to play this year. But if you're just looking at the box office, like what's the global number that would make you say, okay, like the studios are saying like, hey, we know it's not a great year, but like seeing this number, this really makes us comfortable. What would be that number in your mind?
I think 400, I think, is the ideal, not best case scenario, but the safe kind of marker. I think if you can hit that, because the net production budget on this is supposedly around 165, 170. Of course, ticket sales, theaters get half of that, and then the other half goes back to the studio. So say 400, cut that in half, they get 200 million out of it just for the box office receipts. That's not counting any of the merchandise and all these other things that you have to account for. It's not counting the HBO Max, as you said. This is just strictly talking about the box office. I think that would be a solid, happy number. Honestly, I think once you get around like between 300 and 400 million, I think that would be like, okay, we're good. Like I think, because I think with the pandemic and with HBO Max, I think you're taking away potentially 200 million or so. I mean, realistically, because you have people who are just not going to go to the theater no matter what, because there's a pandemic, especially older audience members. Some people don't want to bring their kids out into, an environment like that, if there's a risk of getting sick. You have people that are going to watch on HBO Max. So, and there are theaters, there are places, countries, counties, states, other, regions where theaters aren't open. They're just closed. They're not allowing indoor gatherings and things like that. So that, I think you can say, oh, look, 350 million. If we release this without HBO Max, without a pandemic, it could be 500-600 million. And movies, big blockbuster movies, have started franchises on less than that. Just look at Legendary's own Godzilla. That movie, when it came out in 2014, it made like 500 million or so worldwide. Its budget probably comparable to Dune, if not more. And they've gotten 3 more movies out of that series. So yeah, I think I would be very, very happy if it hit 400. Yeah. I think anything over that would just be amazing. But once it gets past the 250 million into the 300s, I'd be like, okay, there's no reason to be really worried at this point.
Yeah, and one last point of that, and I think John, you brought up that point about like people who are maybe right now they're just not comfortable to going back to the cinema, no matter what the circumstances. Whether it's like older audiences or because they have small children, like whatever the reason is. Like the fact that it's on HBO Max, at least it will give those opportunity for those people to see it who otherwise wouldn't have. And that's potentially one of the upsides of this whole thing, because that they're not going to the cinemas, but they wouldn't have gone to the cinemas anyway, and then they're going to like contribute to potentially giving this a big like opening on streaming as well. So if we have all the people who would go to the cinema, they contribute to the success there, and the people who wouldn't, like being on that same week, that's going to get a lot of attention because people are going to like notice it's going to be like on the marketing everywhere. So like they may not go to cinemas, but they watch it on streaming, and that is going to be that's going to be noticed.
Exactly. Yeah. And last thing I'll say, Marcus, you're 100% right. And that's what people don't want to acknowledge about this HBO Max situation. It's so complicated, but ultimately more people are going to be able to see it, period. You're going to have less box office, obviously, but more people are going to be able to see it this way. And I think that's what you want the most. And I was going on Twitter the other day and I was just scrolling through random like Dune stuff. And I saw an older gentleman who's in the United States, obviously, probably like in his 60s or something. And he was like, I can't wait to watch Dune. Like, I'm so glad it's coming on HBO Max because I like am not able to go to a theater like right now due to health reasons and everything. And I was just like, I'm not going to complain anymore about HBO Max. Like that, like if one person can enjoy the movie that otherwise wouldn't be able to see it, I think that's a good thing. And I think you just have to leave out all the other thinking about it and just, count also on the fact that we know Warner Brothers have put a lot of weight onto HBO Max. So if the numbers are even decent, that's going to help. They have the reasoning and the logic that we probably aren't even, privy to. So that's really all. That's like, I don't even want to talk about HBO Max ever again. Like at this point, the next time I want to talk about it is when the movie actually comes out and we see how many people streamed it opening weekend or whatever. But yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, I can sign off on that.
Cool. I will say this much, just on a side note, which I find kind of hilarious. My HBO Max for this month bill is on the 22nd that it's due. I was like, okay, perfect timing.
So the second and last story that we're going to cover for today is for the Colbert show. So Rebecca Ferguson made an appearance on October 1st. And of course, there was some nice this discussion, like interview questions. But the big thing that came out of that, actually another full clip from the movie, which was like the really touching moment between Lady Jessica by Rebecca Ferguson and Duke Leto, played by Oscar Isaac. And like as I was mentioning on the last show, like it's out there on Twitter or on the feed. Like if you are looking to avoid footage, that's probably one of the ones that you might want to skip for now, because it's literally like a whole another minute from the movie. So Simon, let me start with you. Like, what were your thoughts when you saw that scene?
Well, I gotta thank you, Marcus, because we were talking on Discord, and you're like, "Oh, by the way, they just put this up," and I watched it, and my first reaction was like, I don't think I'm emotionally ready for this movie. I had goosebumps. We talked about Oscar Isaac last week, how, just seeing his back when he's talking to Stephen, and I'm drawing a blank on his last name, how amazing that performance is. And him and Rebecca, wow. And what's interesting is it's a scene that we got one of our first Dune shots from, of them talking, and we've seen little clips of it like on the trailer when it's broken down, but just the performance, it was amazing. And I wouldn't be surprised if Stephen Colbert has the rest of the cast on later, because Colbert is a big Dune nerd, and it was great seeing Rebecca do the Litany of Fear also. I don't know if you guys actually watched the whole entire interview with her. It was just cool. Performance, once again, like, if no one gets nominated for acting or actressing, I just made up a word. If no one gets nominated for their performance, it'll be a shame, because everything I've seen, and this isn't like me having my Dune nerd glasses on, it's just amazing. It is acting at its best. And that comes from Denis and the crew that he made. And yeah, just beautiful. I want the movie. It's going to be a long 2 weeks.
Yeah, Johnny, what was your takeaway from seeing that scene? Did you watch it?
I did, yeah. It's very short. It's like one of those talk show clips. It's like, not very long. But it's great. It's more not as it's very different from the Chalamet Momoa scene that we got, the clip that we discussed last week, which was a longer, like full scene essentially, whereas this is just kind of like a snapshot. But I mean, there's everything you want from this couple of characters from this type of scene. Rebecca Ferguson and Oscar Isaac, both amazing actors. And I love them as a couple. I find them very believable, and everything I've seen from Jessica and Leto so far has felt very genuine. But this really brought out some more of the emotion and the intensity, as well as I also love the musical cue from Hans Zimmer in this scene when hearing Oscar Isaac say Bene Gesserit is just so cool. Like, I don't know, like finally hearing him talk about just things in the world as the character, I think is very interesting. And so, yeah, when that comes up and then those vocals hit, I just thought like, oh, that's a really cool idea. Like, I like that. Because Bene Gesserit, there's such a strong force in this world and in this movie. And I think that having that, and that's even something Denis and Hans Zimmer talked about, was the presence of women in the film and in the world inspired the score and how they were using largely female vocals. And so I think that's such a clever way of using the Bene Gesserit, which kind of hover over the entire universe and are always present, that their vocals, like that actual sound, that cue, is present even in just the mention of them. So there's just, again, it's like one of those things you could talk about it probably for 20 minutes, but yeah, no, I love it. I'm curious. I can't wait to just see how all these fit together. And I'm pretty sure I've seen it said, I don't know if this is accurate or not, but Dune is having, as of this recording, its first New York Film Festival screening tomorrow. And I know Denis, I think it's already recorded, but I want to say it's tomorrow night on the Colbert Show. He's going to be on there, and he'll be doing an interview. And they should have a new clip, I would imagine. So we'll be getting something else. That's exciting. But yeah, no, I'm loving this. I'm loving the characters, loving the acting. I just know, like, I'm not going to be able to like help myself when I see this movie. Like, anyone expecting me to give any legitimate, like, I mean, I'm going to be like honest about it, but like I'm going to have to separate my critic and my fan, because as a fan, everything I'm saying is just 10 out of 10.
Just from that minute or whatever, you can see the chemistry that they love each other. And that's something like that a lot of people have a hard time with, like when they first read the book. It's like, well, does he love her? Yeah, he loves her, but because of certain actions in the universe, he can't, they can't be married.
Yeah, and totally. I mean, just that whole scene, it was a really intimate moment. So, it's not just the dialogue, which is, like very, very personal. It's something that they would only say to themselves alone in the room, but also like the body language, the facial expressions, like how everything was conveyed on that scene, and like how everything comes together. Like, John, you mentioned about the musical cues, and like it does seem to extent we do have that themes, because I immediately recognize, when Duke Leto mentioned, as a Bene Gesserit, and then like you feel that musical cue that we've heard in the soundtracks. I just feel like everything they just thought of every detail. I mean, it's just like my mind is blown every time I spend some time, because of course I'm watching these scenes like multiple times after each other and like picking out all the details. And like you realize that so much thought has gone into every single moment, every movement, every facial expression, like how they use the music. It's really impressive. Let's actually throw up a spoiler warning, and then we'll go on a couple more minutes in depth. So we'll put up the timestamp, like which will be the end of the show, in case you do want to like skip further.
I must not fear, for fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. I will face my fear.
So one thing that also stood out to me is like when we had seen earlier in the earlier trailers and the footage, like when Duke Leto is asking, like if anything happens, will you take care of my son? And like about Lady Jessica, she's angry about the question almost, because I was like, why would you ask that to your mother? But now when you see the full scene. And I'm not asking like as his mother. I'm asking you as a Bene Gesserit. So you see that duality. Like he fully trusts her, but at the same time, like he knows like the scope of the Bene Gesserit's organization, and that they have like their own agenda. So it's like he trusts her, but at the same time, there's this bigger thing going over.
Yeah, I love that he mentioned like you said, we've seen that scene in the trailer. Will you take care of our son? And she's like, of course. But what we don't get in the trailer is as a Bene Gesserit. And him saying it just made me happy. Like, I forgot if it was Johnny or Marcus who said it, but just that right there, I was just like, oh, well, snap. Oscar Isaac said it, but, and it's him knowing, hey, these ladies are pretty powerful, and God forbid something happens to me. And he knows that his demise, his end is near at this point, but he knows that his son will be okay. It's motion, it's wheels into wheels, motion moving. It's Dune. It's perfect.
Mm-hmm. And Johnny, what do you think from the perspective of like the dialogue and the scene overall? Like, it is different from how this is sort of like plays out in the book. Like, what did you think about it from that perspective?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly that's one thing I've just been really happy with, at least from what I've seen so far, and how it seems like it's being received, at least overseas, is it feels very like it still has the same spirit and effect, I feel, from what I've seen of the book, but it's very much like taking it and making it its own thing, and making it, as easy to understand, as easy to like grasp and access as possible. Because you are getting, because it's a very complicated relationship between Leto and Lady Jessica. And so I can't wait to see more of how they express that in the actual movie. How, she is his partner, but she's not his wife. And there are, how do they feel as parents? Like, how do they feel about how, their roles, with relation to Paul? And, Leto feels like he is, kind of going into a trap, and he needs Lady Jessica to reassure him about the future, and the posterity of their family. So yeah, I really think it's going to work. I really feel like this is going to be something. I have a brother, for example, who is older, and he hasn't read the book. He hasn't seen any the previous film or anything.
Welcome to the club.
His wife, my sister-in-law, she actually went ahead and read the novel. And so it's gonna be really interesting, because I know how I'm gonna feel about it. I'm really interested to see how she goes in, having read just the book, only having the book in her head, in her mind, how she's going to feel about how it's translated. And then him, on the other hand, who has absolutely no understanding or any prior knowledge or context of the film, is going to feel as a complete like newbie. And then of course I have myself, I pretty much know everything about what to expect with the movie, who did what they changed, what they haven't. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting, stretch of opinions. But I just think, because that's the thing, a lot of people have said that, people that have seen it already, whether they're press or fans or whatever, that, oh, I have no idea. Didn't read the book, didn't know anything about it. Now I'm going to go buy the book. I'm going to go read the book. I'm going to, I found it very accessible. I thought it was very, easy to follow. It wasn't too dense. Even people just last night coming out of the London screening, they had another screening there where Mark Duke Info was at. And one guy in particular said, I think this could be like the next pop culture like phenomenon, like a Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings or Star Wars, because it's easy to follow. It's not, doesn't treat you as an idiot. It doesn't like, hold your hand too much, but it is streamlined. It's easy to understand. And I've never seen the book, but I liked this movie a lot. And I think a lot of people will too.
My brother told me that. I asked him, I'm like, did they make sense? And he's like, yeah. What also helped was the beginning. What we saw in the IMAX, he's like, it puts you right in the world. You're instantly in that world and you get it. And it's not like you said, feeding you like all this information. You start getting it, the mystery of it. So I think most people will get it. I think that intro in the beginning, I don't want to spoil it for people that haven't seen the IMAX stuff, but I feel like it explains the world, and I think people will be interested. I'm curious to know if people love the movie, if they're going to love the book, because the book is slow and it is hard to get into, but at that point you've already been introduced to the world, so it'll be interesting.
What you're getting a little bit.
And that point about how they're like, of course you have the narration in the beginning, but like it feels more natural, not just like like someone like speaking to the camera and voicing over it. And then like all the other scenes where you do get like it just feels natural. It's like when you're talking about like whether it's a book or different story mediums, like show, don't tell, and that's what I got out of this scene. I know that we're going to get like several scenes with the Bene Gesserit and like so some things that maybe weren't even in the book, but like when Duke Leto talks about the Bene Gesserit and you feel the distrust about the organization in his voice, and like how it's complicating the relationship with his partner in this case, like you're basically getting the idea as the audience, like even though we don't have to have like a full explanation, like this organization is very powerful organization and they manipulate people, etc., etc. You're basically feeling that through the characters' actions and their words and their body language. So I really appreciate it, and as you're saying, like excited to see how this all comes together. Simon, did you have any other thoughts on like differences on this?
No, I mean, like you were saying about the Bene Gesserit, also, we don't know how powerful they are if you just read the first book. They're powerful. It's later on in the original six books that we find out how powerful, and then you're like, oh, okay, they're a force to be reckoned with. So it's just such a glorious, beautiful scene.
And then that moment at the end, I thought we had more time. Like that was a really emotional moment. Like watching that. That
was hard. I'm glad I'm seeing it by myself the first time, not with my team members at work, because I think I'm going to have the ugly cry the whole entire movie out of joy. I mean, I had the ugly cry a little bit when I saw the IMAX preview.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? I don't care. I'm bringing a box of Kleenex both times.
Bring your still suit as well. That would all take care of it.
But my water, I'll reuse my water for myself.
Okay, guys. So that's the end of our show for today. Like, thanks all for joining us. And if you're overseas, we're doing this playing. Like, keep watching it, keep enjoying this epic movie. And if you're like us in the States or the other territories waiting for it, we just have like just under 2 weeks to go. So we're almost there, and we're looking forward to talking about it and breaking down every single detail with you. So Johnny, I'll start with you. Where can people find you?
Yeah, find me on Twitter at Johnny Sobchak. You can also check me out on Instagram and Letterboxd. Can't wait.
Simon?
S Dowdy on Twitter and Insta. I'll be around.
And this was Marcus Gabriel, and you can find me on DuneNewsNet.com or on DuneNewsNet on Twitter and Instagram. So talk to everybody next week.
We hope you've enjoyed Dune Talk. Remember to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you know when the next episode drops. Stay tuned to DuneNewsNet.com and add us to your social feeds. Be the first to hear breaking news and reviews.